morale problems, what does that mean? I'm not saying you do, I'm just asking. Swimming's a little more individual. If your volleyball team has morale problems, what's that mean? Don't get along real well, or maybe you don't have a lot of confidence in your head coach. I'm not saying you don't, I'm just saying. And that was the deal with Carrington. His men thought he was too soft. They didn't respect him very much. They thought he was too soft. They thought he was kind of wimpy, to be honest with you. So Colonel Carrington's command had morale problems because his officers considered him soft. It's okay maybe if your soldiers think that, but if your officers, the guys that you're going to command to go do things, if they think you're soft, that's not good. Okay? Now, Carrington had a reputation of being hesitant to engage Indian hostiles. He always thought he was short of men and horses. Always played the defensive nature, would never go on the offensive. And that really bothered his two officers because they felt there were times he needed to be aggressive and kick butt and take names, not sit back and wait. Okay? And you'll find out in these Indian wars, you don't want to sit back much. Okay? Because they'll come get you if you give them a chance. And we'll talk about that. So Colonel Carrington had the reputation of being hesitant to engage Indian hostiles, always believing that he was short of both men and horses. So they picked a bad spot, right? They have morale problems, and on top of that, the construction of Fort Phil Kearny is going to be seen by local Indian tribes as a disruption to their way of life. They're not going to be for the building of this. Now, this building of this fort is despised by the three Indian tribes that inhabit that area: the Arapaho, the Sioux, and the Cheyenne. All inhabit that area around the location they picked to build Fort Phil Kearny. All three tribes see this fort building as a disruption of their way of life. All three tribes despise the idea of building a fort on their land. Now, despite this, as I mentioned before, Colonel Carrington is a defensive commander. His philosophy is, I'm not here to engage hostile Indians. I'm here to protect the Bozeman Trail. Now, if somebody attacked him, would he engage him? Certainly would. But he wasn't the type to go out and engage hostiles. His job was to build the fort and protect the Bozeman Trail, not go out on the offensive and try to kill Indians. That was not his way of thinking. And we'll see if he's right or wrong as we get into this lecture later. Okay, that'll take us to the construction of Fort Phil Kearny. I'll tell you about this because we haven't started yet. I'll tell you how this whole thing started. And we're going to go to Fort Phil Kearny. You know what you're going to see when you get there? Nothing. There's nothing there. And when I first took kids there, or was going to take kids there, I thought, this is really weird. We'll just go there and see nothing. But the great thing about it is you get bits and pieces of it, and you get to visualize in your mind after we go through the lecture of what was where and what it looked like. It actually is pretty cool. And kids that have gone have very much enjoyed it. So if you don't have this lecture and you went to Fort Phil Kearny, you might go, oh, this is interesting. There's nothing here. But when you get the history, it's much better. All right. Well, it was in late June of 1866 that soldiers and civilians arrived at the chosen location and began preparations to construct the fort. Again, it was in late June 1866 when both soldiers and civilians arrived at this chosen location to prepare themselves to construct the fort. This is what they brought with them. 120 wagons full of supplies and building materials. Each wagon was pulled by 6 mules. So McHenry, math wizard, how many mules were at Fort Phil Kearny's building? 120 wagons, each wagon had 6 mules pulling. 20, that a girl. 720 mules. That's a lot of animals, right? But you can tell about the amount of equipment and stuff they were bringing to build this fort. 120 wagons, 6 mules pulling each wagon. Now they're not going to be eating mules while they're doing this, so what else do you think they brought with them? 360 to be exact. Cattle. Cattle. Okay, they brought 360 head of cattle as well. Now, when this fort will be completed, they are estimating the population to be about 600 people. 450 soldiers, 150 civilians will be populating Fort Phil Kearny. That's who's arrived in late June of 1866. Approximately 600 people, 450 soldiers, about 150 civilians. Now, of these 450 soldiers, Aaron Vigil, 80% of them were considered green recruits. What does that mean? Very new. Yeah, very new, very little military experience. It'd be like a green tomato. You wait till it gets red and gets ripe before you can enjoy it the most, and it does you the most good. These green recruits are not ripened yet enough to really know a lot about the military way. So you have a little bit of a disadvantage there because the Army consists of 80% green recruits. Now, how about the male citizens? Excuse me, male citizens or civilians. They're going to have a job, aren't they, when they build this fort? What do you think their job's going to be? Nope. They are going to be woodcutters and hay growers in the local field, in the local fields. What are they going to do? How are they building this fort? What are they building it out of? Wood. There's a nice forested area around this area that they're going to go, right? And they're going to have these civilian woodcutters in the woods cutting down logs to build the fort, while the other civilians, because they got to feed these cattle and mules and whatever else they might bring into being, they have hay being grown in the nearby fields. That's what the male civilians are doing. Not a lot of female civilians there. A few, and I'll tell you about those in a minute. Now, are there any women and children there? Did you think? There is. And where do they come from? What? Which soldiers? Officers, wives, and children. Unlike Grant, who couldn't take his family with him, they allowed the officers to bring their wives and children, and as a result of that, there were 11 women and 18 children that inhabited Fort Phil Kearny. 11 women and 18 children. They were the wives and children of the officers. So they get there in late when? June. And ironically, they begin construction on Friday, July 13th, 1866. Friday the 13th. We'll see if that is apropos or not. So the construction of Fort Phil Kearny begins on Friday, July 13th, 1866. And like I mentioned, the fort will be built out of logs from the surrounding forest land. Now, if you were a soldier, you would be given one of 4 jobs daily. One of 4 jobs. And I'll tell you what they were. So if you're a soldier, you would get one of these 4 jobs. You might do it one day, might do it a month, who knows. But these were the 4 jobs that were assigned. The first job is the soldier was assigned, Corporal Keller, today you are to dig a trench 3 feet deep by 3 feet wide by 9 feet long. Make sure you have that done by the end of the day. That's what Corporal Keller's doing today. What are they putting in that trench? No. What? No.
Feces.
How are they going to build this? How are they going to... You guys are way out. They're going to put logs in there. They're going to set the logs up in there. And so they're building a trench, the complete boundary of what? The fort. Okay? So some soldiers were given the task every day of digging a trench 3 feet wide, 3 feet deep, 9 feet long. That could be one job you would get daily during the construction. Then, Private Gayton is going to have this job. She is going to be assigned the task of placing the logs in the trenches. Okay? So while Corporal Keller is digging the trenches, Private Gayton is putting the logs in the trenches, and securing them so they will stand fast. Then Sergeant Kozlowski, she's given the job of protecting the woodcutters as they are cutting the trees down because they're under continual assault from the hostile Plains Indians that don't want them to build the fort. So Sergeant Kozlowski has got her carbine and she's out in the wooded area protecting the woodcutters who are under constant attack from the hostile Indians while they're cutting the wood for the fort. Then Private Lawton, he's assigned lookout duty. And he's supposed to keep an eye on either friendlies or hostiles that are approaching the construction site. So he's on lookout duty. What do you need to be on lookout duty, Laramie?
Something tall.
You need something way up in the air, and there just happened to be a lookout spot on a ridge which provided a great view of approaching wagon trains, visitors, or hostiles, and that lookout point received the name Pilot's Knob. And you will have an opportunity in May to climb to the top of that. It's pretty cool. You can see a long ways from there. So that would be the fourth job. A soldier would be assigned lookout duty, keeping an eye on friendlies or hostiles that would be approaching the construction site. And outside the fort there was a lookout spot on a ridge which provided a great view of approaching wagon trains and visitors. And that lookout spot was referred to as Pilot's Knob. Okay, let's tell you about the characteristics of Fort Phil Kearny. We're going to build this baby. And this is what you're going to be envisioning. What's that?
Has that as the characteristics of Fort Phil.
Oh, did you really? Well, nice job. You just have to cross that out and put construction of Fort Phil Kearny. It's okay. It'll flow. How long do you think it took him to build Fort Phil Kearny? Elisa? How long did it take him to build that fort? You are on fire. Just a little less than a year. And the official dedication was on October 31st, 1866. Or 1867. So Fort Phil Kearny was completed in less than 1 year. That doesn't mean, if you look at the date and say, well, gee, that's dedicated. Yes?
So they started building it on Friday the 13th and then dedicated it on Halloween?
No, of the next year.
Yeah.
67.
It's still Halloween. Yeah, but it's still Halloween. So they started it on Friday the 13th and then dedicated it on Halloween. Which are two both like.
Weird. Okay, I never thought of that. Thank you for sharing.
How did you know? How do you not? I thought that was the point. Yeah.
It is going to be now. From now on, starting tomorrow. Very nice. I didn't pick that up. I'm not a Halloween guy, so I really don't care what Halloween. That's a good. Thank you. Anyway, let's tell you a little bit about it. The official dedication occurred on October 31st, 1867. Interesting. How many acres did Fort Phil Kearny, from boundary all the way around? How many acres inside?
3, 4, 9, 68, 12.
17. Fort Phil Kearny covered 17 acres. The fort's walls were 8 feet high, and more than 4,000 logs were used in its construction. So Fort Phil Kearny covered 17 acres. The fort's walls were 8 feet high, with more than 4,000 logs used in the construction. And does that bring a question or a thought to you? Well, there's a lot of trees there. Does 8 feet high seem high enough to keep anybody out? Yeah, but here's the thing. Native Americans were not the type that would attack a fortification. Their harassment, they were trying to keep them from getting it built. Once it was built, it wasn't something they were going to attack. Because what would happen if they attacked that fort? They would have high casualties. That wasn't in their nature. That isn't how they fought. So once they got the thing built, they were very safe inside. Not so safe if you stepped outside. That's what they waited for. So we'll talk about that later. But it covered 17 acres, the walls were 8 feet high, more than 4,000 logs used. Right in the middle of the fort was a 120-foot flagpole And here are some of the things that were inside. I'm going to give you 10 things that were inside the fort. So right in the middle was a 120-foot flagpole, and here are the other things that were inside that fort. They had built 3 steam-powered sawmills. 3 steam-powered sawmills were in Fort Phil Kearny. What would you use a sawmill for? Cutting lumber. And what would you cut lumber for?
Firewood.
Build houses and furniture inside the fort. Very good. Because Colonel Carrington, do you think he's going to have a nice house inside that fort? You can bet your dollar he's going to. Okay? So 3 steam-powered sawmills cut lumber into boards for the construction of buildings inside the fort and furniture inside the buildings. They also had a brick factory in there. Brick factory. What else might you need in there? And I'll do that outside. A hospital, very good. They had a hospital in there. What else might you need in there? A bakery, very good. What else?
Barracks.
They would need barracks for who?
Soldiers.
Soldiers. Barracks, very good. So we said a brick factory, 3 steam-powered sawmills, a hospital, a bakery, barracks for the enlisted men. They didn't really sell anything.
Like a storage, like weapons?
Orange house.
They will have, they didn't build it, but they will, keep going.
Sure.
A church, that a girl, a church. So we got 3 steam-powered sawmills, a brick factory, a hospital, a bakery, a church, and barracks for the enlisted men. What else? That would be built as well.
School.
Nope, that's a good one, but not true. That's a good one. They probably did some of that, I'm guessing they did that in the church. How about, you think anybody's going to get a little unruly?
Oh,
A jail. Need a jail. What did you say? A jail. Also important would be a saddle shop to take care of the saddles. Which leaves only one thing. Where are you going to put all that livestock and your cavalry horses? Not a barn, a corral. They had a corral inside the fort. Yeah. Corral inside the fort area.
How do you spell
Corrals. So, make sure you have these down. 3 steam-powered sawmills, a brick factory, a hospital, a jail, a bakery, a saddle shop, a church, corrals for cavalry horses and livestock, and barracks for the enlisted men. Tomorrow we will tell you the difference between the treatment an enlisted man gets and the treatment that an officer gets at Fort Phil Kearny. Okay, perfect. Yeah. No, I just told you. Are you missing something?